Hello, Mr. Shah.
Mr. Sahota, how are you doing? It's been almost 30 seconds since we last saw each other.
I'm good, mate. All right, so look, I've got a question for you.
Go.
If you were to launch a brand today and no one knew about it, no one knew about you, how would you go about doing it to make sure that the brand becomes known and the product becomes successful?
So it's funny because it doesn't matter what you sell, you need a brand. You could be selling concrete, you could be selling whatever you sell, you need a brand because you need something to emotionally connect with. I know that sounds really bizarre, but it's true because, you know, we built businesses in B2B, quite a lot of them, right? And it's easy to think that you're selling a product from one business to another business, but you're not. It's a human selling to another human, even if the
Yeah.
business is buying. So, so I'll tell you a little bit about what we did with B2B branding, but then I'd love to know what you did with Sings, which was getting into the hearts of consumers, right? So with B2B, question one is what is keeping the buyer up at night? So what are the things that are on their mind when they're buying? Is it quality? Is it service? Is it price? Is it delivery? You know, what is it that people are demanding? What is it that inserts you into that space? And what makes you feel like you deserve to be there?
Okay.
And and also it's a little bit about the age demographic and background of the buyers. So we launched Linen Connect. So Linen Connect came into a market supplying like hospitality, textiles, and commercial textiles, things like that. All of our competitors were great big giant businesses. They looked, one of them was like over 100 years old, gigantic businesses. And but the buyers had changed over the years. So a lot of the buyers now were much more kind of, used to professional services brands and things like that, not like big giant heritage textiles brands. So step one was make the brand look and feel more like what the buyer was used to, and what they are kind of intellectually thinking about as a quality business. And then the second part was just really trying to understand what's keeping them up at night. Like what are those brand values that we had to start communicating early? So that kind of gave us the form of the brand. So we came up with Linen Connect because gave it a really cool professional services look. The values were all around, in that case, on time every time, because delivery was just the number one metric they were concerned about, right? But then it was how do you get in front of that buyer when you don't really have the capital that your competitors have, right?
Yeah.
And that was about, well, what are they reading? What's the cheapest way to access them? So the trade press was very, very cost effective. It was also we had to do things which were a bit more quirky to catch the attention because one of the best tips I can give people is publicity is cheaper than advertising, right? So
Okay.
if you can do something fun and interesting that gets you into a publication for free, that's cheaper than paying a few £1,000s for an ad. So one of the first things we did was I sent um, a few boxes of towels to a fashion designer in Milan, and I said, "Can you turn these into wedding dresses?"
Right.
And we got this couture designer to create these beautiful wedding dresses out of hotel towels. And all the publications were like, "Oh, geez, we love this. We'll run this." And you get in front of the buyer. And so that was kind of step one to really just get in front of them. But how was it with Sings? Because obviously you were going into a very, very competitive space in foods.
Yeah, so I mean, look, before I go on to things, so to recap what you're saying, so we're launching a brand. No one knows about us. No one knows who we are and what we're doing. What you're saying is that what you did with Linen Connect was that first of all, you understood your place in the marketplace. So you've got these
Yeah,
existing businesses that are hundreds of years old, or they've got really deep pockets. So
yeah,
you understood that you had to be different just by virtue of being new, and to figure out what that difference is. Then you're
yeah,
saying it was that you understood who's making the buying decision. So
correct.
the people that you're selling to, or the companies that you're selling to, may have been these kind of big corporations, but the people making the buying decisions had changed.
Yeah,
Understanding how you're different, then understanding who your buyer is, and then thirdly, if I'm understanding correctly, what you were saying is that you were trying to understand what problem they had and how you could solve it.
yeah,
And landed on with Linen Connect which is quite interesting. And if I'm hearing this correctly, what you said is that you were not necessarily selling anything innovative, anything new with your linens and your
Yeah,
you were selling speed and reliability. Those that's
correct.
with Linen
And
Connect.
yeah,
That
and just one little thing, because I want to hear about yours as well. But one little thing which is really interesting is the person making the decision isn't always the person you think, right? So if we're selling to, let's say, a hospital group or a hotel group or something like that, the buyer's the one that issues you the purchase order and the buyer's the one that issues the contract. But it's oftentimes the CEO or the CFO who is the influencer, the chief executive or the chief financial officer. So oftentimes, particularly if you're a brand new supplier in a market, quite rightly, the buyer's like, I don't want to take a risk, right? Because their job's on the line. But if that CEO or the owner of the business says to their head of buying, hey, I'd love to give these guys a chance. I'd love to give this company a chance. It pulls the demand in, right? So so I was always really, really key to try and get in front of that chief exec or CFO or the business owner and say, hey, look, you don't know us. Here's what we're doing. We're new. I really want to work with you. How can we make it work? And then they connect you with the buyer and
mm.
it pulls the demand through.
So it's really interesting hearing you talk about that because with Mr. Singh's, so Singh's, I look at it like I've got Mr. Singh's 1.0, which was when we were selling chili sauces, and 2.0, which is what we're doing now, selling crisps. So if I talk about 1.0, the first version, one of the earliest wins we had was that, the mere fact that we're this like lunatic family from East London making chili sauce in the garden shed, and then we're at these food shows, stopping anyone and everyone
Yeah.
by this chili sauce, made us like unique enough to get some kind of attention. But very quickly, people were writing about us and talking about us, and then we got onto the radar of Tom Parker Bowles, who was at that
Yeah.
writing for the Mail on Sunday. And he turned up to our house in East London and he wrote an article on us.
Literally just came round to your house.
Came to East London to write an article about us. And bear in mind, this is, well, he's the son of who is, now the Queen of this country. And like he's turning up to one of the roughest parts of East London to meet us and to come to our shed and see how we make this chili sauce because he's a genuine chili head. He's a lovely guy. But the point being is that article put our name out there into the world. And the same kind of story occurred. The CEO of Selfridges
Mm,
read the article, happened to be a mate of Tom Parker Bowles as well. But
of course.
that aside, he read the article. We got an email on
Yeah.
the website saying, "I read your article. I love your story, and I want to put your product in Selfridges." So if we had tried to approach Selfridges directly, I don't think it would have worked. But because we had
Yeah.
this alternative route, that put us on the radar of, like you said, the person who's the ultimately the key influencer
Mm,
decision, and that opened the door to the buyer contacting us, say, look, we want to put your product on shelf, and then the rest was history. That was been down to us to make that relationship work. But I think, like going back to the earlier question about what did we do with things that we realized early on that hyper competitive marketplace in terms of chili products, chili sauces.
mm,
At the time, there was not a kind of British chili sauce brand, and so
yeah.
come up, and we were one of the first, which was quite fortunate for us. But at the same time, I think what we leaned heavily into was just telling our authentic story,
Yeah.
business experience or business training at that time, and the only story that we could tell was our true story. And we realized that's what people connected with, and the authenticity of it was what endeared people to us. And it at least opened the door. And then when you sit down with, let's say, the buyers of Tesco or Sainsbury's, you have to then also have that
Yeah.
professional head on your shoulders to have those business conversations. But I think that's a slightly different conversation.
Mm.
Um,
But
and
do you know what's really interesting though? Like when I hear you talk about it, and for the people that are listening or watching, we've known each other for a long time. And one of the things which I think is really important for people to know is the time frame here, right? Because when you hear any kind of, entrepreneur story, it sounds like I did this, then this happened, and then this happened, and it all happened. But what you talked about there, that took time. Like, you know, from that first idea to getting that game-changing news article, like how long was that?
To be fair, from when we launched, it was less than a year and a half.
It's still like there's still a long time though. A year and a half's a long time. And this is really important because for anyone starting a business listening to this, right? You've got to be able to support yourself for like a year and a bit, at
And
least.
it was evenings and weekends, bear in mind. It was, you get home and at 7, let's say, because you travel at at the time, you're traveling to work, coming back home, maybe have a bite to eat, and then you're getting to work making chili sauce, and you're not sleeping until 1 a.m. and you're doing that for a
Yeah.
year. Weekends you're at shows or you're making more sauce or you're packing orders. So yeah, we was everyone was working and then doing this on the side.
Yeah.
Um, it was only until I think 2012 that I got to a point where I was like, wow, look, I need to do something with this. Either I go all in or I leave it because I'd put my life savings into it at the time,
Yeah.
and it was gone. And so either I get money in to make this work and grow it, or I shut it down. It's been a great ride.
Yeah.
And then that's a different story altogether. But look, let's play a game. Let's say we've got I think, I don't know, let's say what's the most normal business that we can think of that's on a high street that would still be functioning? I don't know. Let's say a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
It's a brand new coffee shop that's opening. On a average high street. No one knows about it. No one knows anything about you, your product. How would you go about building a name around that coffee shop? So a brand is one thing and then marketing it second. How would you go about doing it so that very quickly it was successful and paying for itself?
Yeah. For me, and again, this is just my view, is step one is just figure out what people want now, right? Because, so for example, so I live in a place called Didsbury in South Manchester. And if I think about the new openings that succeeded and stayed open and survived, it's the ones that adapted to people who needed to work as well. So it wasn't the classic coffee shop where you go in and there's jazz music playing and they whistle you through. They just serve really good coffee. They've got nice tables. Everything's got a plug. You can work from there. It's you know. So step one for me is obviously the product has to be good. That's a given. You have to have good coffee and you have to have the selection of coffee and milks and all these kind of things. But it's what do people want in that neighborhood? Do they just want to go in, get a really nice coffee and leave? Or do they need a destination? And so for me, that's always step one is in that locality, what do people really need? Um, and I've done this before where literally sometimes you have to just knock on doors and ask people or just chat to people or go to, when we launched a retail brand, I literally had to just go into shops and just talk to people and just try and understand because just because I care doesn't mean that they do.
What, as in you spoke to the shopkeepers or the customer?
Nope. Random customers. So we launched a brand called Charlotte Thomas, which is a home textiles brand, and I was like, I don't know what people want right now. So I literally used to drive around the country, going to shops, going to the home section, and just chatting to people like that were shopping there, just to
Say,
understand what they were.
what
Sorry.
were what were the bars? What would you say to them when you'd approach a stranger in the towel section?
So to me, it's playing dumb. To me, the easiest thing to do because everyone loves to share knowledge, right?
Right,
So for example, I could walk up to you in the shop and go, oh hey, I'm just moving house. I don't know what to buy. Like, what do you reckon? Like, what's good? Like, what would you suggest? Because I don't know anything about it.
right.
And so you approach it with humility. And some people are like, I'll just go speak to the shopkeeper. And some people are like, well, actually, you know, I kind of wish they did this, but I'm going to get that. And you start to just build a little map of maybe where there's a gap. And and what became really apparent is there used to be a brand called Dormer, which was a really nice British brand, classic design, stuff like that. Dormer had gone bust and then been sold on, and so many people were like, oh, I used to love Dormer's designs. I wish there was something a bit like that, but I'm going to get this one instead. And I was like, hmm. And that was really key then to how we created that initial brand. So back to the coffee shop example. If I was doing that, I'd probably just go hang out in some bars and restaurants or go to the supermarket and just chat to people. Oh, hey, where's good to go get a coffee? What do you recommend around here? Because it helps you understand what's happening in your customer's mind, not yours.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what would you do? How would you approach that challenge?
Well, with the coffee shop,
Mm,
yeah, I feel like what you've said is spot on. Like you have to understand what your customers want and why they would want to come to
yeah,
they coming back to you. I suppose once you'd have that information, for me, I would then move on to really truly understanding who they are and starting to paint
yeah,
that particular person and saying, well, you know what, we have people that are work from home, but they like to come in here a couple of days a week so that they've got someone around them. We've got mums that come in here after they drop the kids off at school and they just
yeah,
like that's their friend circle because otherwise they're really super busy doing their thing. Then in the evenings we have couples that come in and there's a book club and all these different profiles that get built. Uh, Doing, let's say, you've gone out and you've started asking people what they want from a coffee shop, and once you've got that profile, I would then start to look at the stories I'd want to tell those particular
yeah,
for a marketing from a marketing perspective. So how could you emotionally connect with those people to ensure that they know that the place that you're setting up or that you're about to open the doors to is the place for them?
yeah,
For example, let's say the mums group, be like, okay, like you've dropped the kids off at school. Maybe a couple of dads in there as well who do the school run, but let's say it's a mums group to start off with. Um, the marketing to them would be around, look, hey, this is a social place for you to come and just unwind for an hour or two before you get on with your busy day, and this is what we can offer you. Uh,
yeah.
Whatever story that we want to tell, but it'd be around connecting with them emotionally so that
Mm,
we've thought about them and that this is the place for them to not only come to once but to keep coming back to. And
yeah,
then they do come through the doors exceeding expectations. Not necessarily with money, not necessarily with things that are going to cost the business money, but sorry, cost the business in time, effort, energy, money, whatever it is. But
mm,
just come in and they go, oh, this is more than what I thought. It's super comfortable. The lighting's nice. It's always nice and warm when it's cold outside. These little touches that they're
yeah.
expecting.
So do you know what's really interesting? I think there's a great case study, Gales. So obviously, when I come to London, you're never more than 20 meters from a Gales. Like it doesn't matter where you are in London, within 20 meters, there's a Gales. And we're seeing the same all around the country in Manchester as well. And what I love about Gales is doesn't feel like a big brand. It feels like you're going into someone's local cafe. It feels like it's, somebody called Gail who owns it, and you're going in and here's the pastries and bread she's made and so on. And I wonder what it is because, this is probably one of the most competitive high street categories because you'll usually have Starbucks, Gales, Cafe Nero, everything Pret all together. So I'm wondering what Gales have done differently that have made people actively choose to go there.
I feel like I feel like they've got the newness angle. Uh,
Yeah,
People would they may be kind of rebelling against chains and corporates. Gales, unless you've heard of it, it's like, oh, that's new, and it looks really good. Like it looks quality, like just walking by.
yeah,
Then when you walk in, the layout is quite different because of the
yeah,
bake component and the pastries and the sandwiches component. It all looks like it's like fresh made and handmade.
yeah,
I don't know where it is made, but that's what it looks like. The bread's it's still got the dusting on there,
yeah,
like dusting, and these little touches make it feel quite homely and authentic. And the people who work there, um, I feel like they're always quite personable and they make you
mm,
welcome and they just ask you questions and they smile a lot, which I suppose most places do, but this is
Yeah.
the experience of going.
Do you know what's really interesting as well? As you were talking about it, I was thinking about the coffee shops, and Gales have their counter where you pay is shorter horizontally and a bit lower than like a Starbucks and things like that. So you actually end up in closer proximity to your server, which is great.
The way as well. Like, when you go,
Yeah.
it's almost like there's a barrier. Like you've got the machines, and then
Yeah.
another barrier, which might be deliberate. And I feel like Costa, Nero's, all these other places are quite similar. Whereas when I've been to a Gales, it's not like that. Like you've got the pastry section, you order, and then there's a gap. So maybe there is that element of connectivity. And then also the actual cafes themselves, when you sit in them, they're light, they're really,
Yeah.
they're quite spacious. And they don't have that kind of d d dark branded feel of other coffee shops, which is probably what helps them succeed. So look, what if we switched it? What if it was an even more competitive world, which was online? Let's say you were launching an online brand, well, I suppose a fashion brand. Let's say if you were to launch a fashion brand today, online, you're launching your Instagram account, your TikTok account. How would you go about doing it to make enough noise for your brand to be successful in this particular year?
It's hard. I mean, that's
Would you do it first of all?
personally, and again, this is just my view. Online, so e-commerce is one of those deceptive areas. So what I mean by that is the general assumption that I think a lot of people have in e-com is it's about making as much noise as possible to win those eyeballs. And when we've launched and grown, or some of the ones that we've bought over the years, e-com companies, the ones that succeed are the ones where like 70% plus of the activities on the business bit. It's not the brand bit. It's kind of your logistics chain has to be super tight for deliveries. Like your customer service has to be super tight. The product has to be really, really, really priced well and at the right quality and all these certifications. And because actually, once you've caught that eyeball, it's what happens next. And are they going to come back? And so when we built the ecom businesses, that's always been step one is how do you make it so wonderful and efficient to deal with, but actually make the product super cheap or super cost effective for that customer, like super valuable for them. If you can do that bit, then you can go capture that eyeball. But the challenge often is that you'll capture the eyeball, but the product's really expensive, or it's going to take 3 weeks to deliver, or the customer service is awful, and they're never going to come back because that first transaction you have with that customer is really expensive. So, for the listeners and viewers, the two most important metrics you will ever have in e-commerce are COCA and LTV, cost of customer acquisition, which is how much did it cost you to get that customer to click buy, and the lifetime value of the customer, which is how much do they spend with you before they go meh and go somewhere else. So those are the two really key metrics that make a successful e-com business. It has to be kind of anchored on that first before you go capture those eyeballs.
Okay, so assume that we've got the back end sorted out. So maybe it's not a physical ecom business. Let's say it's a digital ecom business or a services like a fitness plan or
Yeah,
something digital. But let's say the back end is sorted out. So delivery of the product is
yeah,
the product itself, the quality of the product is incredible. The customer service has been sorted out, and that's going to be phenomenal. So we've got
yeah.
all the space. Now we've got nothing. We've got no eyeballs. No one knows about us. How would you go about putting that out into the world
Yeah.
from a digital perspective?
So for me, and again, just my view is it's kind of micro budgets and being humble, right? Those two things. So you have to produce content. You have to try and think about the messaging that gets out there. But the important thing to remember is it's again like classic bit of business school advice. So the thing that you think is important might not be important to your customer, right? Classic example. go talk to an engineer at Ferrari, right? And say, hey, why should I buy that car? And they'll reel off all these amazing engineering details and specs. Go ask the customer, it's a Ferrari. I wanted a Ferrari. It's cool, right?
Yeah,
Completely different reason. So you've got to figure out what is that reason. So what we've done before is tiny micro campaigns with budgets, and I mean sometimes like £50, right? Budget to get it in front of some eyeballs, just to figure out, well, did that get engagement? Did that get engagement? And then you refine and refine. And then maybe after you've spent, I don't know, £500, £1,000, you'll have a really sharp idea of what is it that matters to the consumers who are converting. And that's so important. And that's the sort of slightly scientific way that I would approach it. And I think so. For example, let's say you're selling an online fitness plan. I think that's a really good example because a lot of people who set up a self-employed might want to create online fitness business, right? So it's you might have a plan that you think is really valuable, really interesting. Go put a bit of micro budget campaign together to try and see are people actually interested, or go a step earlier. When I've worked with a few startups, I've said to them, don't even bother building the product yet, especially if it's a service. Do a landing page saying, I'm launching this amazing 12-day fitness plan, 12-week fitness plan for weight loss after having a baby, for example. Little landing page, bit of micro budget, try getting it out there to see, do people actually want that? Bless you. And if they pre-register and they're interested, then go build the product, right? So that's another way of doing it. But with it'd be good to know how you've done it with the crisps as well, because obviously, again, hyper competitive category. And
yeah.
you're
So
going directly to the consumer with a product that's arguably more expensive than the one that you walk into shop for, but they're still buying it.
yeah, so I feel like a lot of what we talked about earlier still applies, and I also feel that a lot of people miss that business is actually basic. There's basics in business that are applicable,
Mm.
whether you're online, whether you're offline, whether you have a high tech
Yeah,
business or it's a basic bread and butter business. Knowing who your customer is and why they buy from you is critical. And then being able to communicate to them consistently and knowing where to communicate with them consistently is so important. And so for us, we fortunately, we had a following already, but a lot of that following was to do with chili sauces. So we were switching people, and we're like, what's the common thread that we can communicate? And it was the chili aspect and the family business aspect and our
yeah,
story. So we actually relaunched, should I say, with we used a waiting list strategy. So we put ourselves,
yeah,
if this is this is who we are, this is what we do, this is our product. If this sounds like it's of interest to you, sign up here. And we had loads and loads and loads of people sign up to that. And we constantly communicated it to our existing customer base. And once we had enough people, we're like, okay, there's enough of an interest here for us to launch the product and make it work from day zero. But prior to that, before, like, let's say when we launched the first product, the first bag of crisps, the first flavor, we actually started it off with a poll. We were just asking people, would you be interested in this? Does it
yeah,
make, and would you buy it? And when we got enough yeses, we're like, okay, this could work. And that was the way that we went about doing it. And I think it does just tie back to the basics. If you're able to understand who your customer is and then constantly communicate to them the
yeah,
they like about you. And the thing with online is that you have to learn to do it in so many different ways. I mean, online marketing and digital marketing, and
yeah,
that in itself is a whole science. And there's people that are experts at that. And that's not necessarily what's in question here. But I think being able to identify who your ideal audience is and getting enough of them to sign up and
yeah,
say, yes, I'm interested in I'm ready to go when you're ready to go. And actually, I mean, that's how we did it with our business. And that's how Huel did it, right? That's how they
yeah,
launched. I think it was in a Facebook group. And the founder, he was like, look, I'm thinking of putting this thing together. Help me create it. Kind of like your act dumb thing. That's what he did in a like a fitness Facebook group. He was like acting dumb. Like, what do you recommend? For a protein. What do you recommend for something that's high carb, high protein? And everyone started communicating on that thread. Then he introduced the idea of the product. Then he refined that idea with the audience.
Yeah.
And then I think he created like a wait list or like a yeah, a wait list where he would send samples, like the first version of the product. And then off
Mm.
the back, built Huel and did 50 million in sales.
You know what's pretty important as well is I see lots of early stage entrepreneurs that have gone too far down the road without doing any of this, right? So there's two nuggets from that. So number one is, you hear lots of tech people talking about minimum viable prototype, right? It's every business. You've got to do this. What is the next thing you need to do to try and understand if this is worth pursuing, right? It's what is the next step, and that's your next prototype, and you've got to go through that. But to do that, the second nugget is you've got to be open, right? The amount of times I've met a startup was like, oh no, I can't talk about it yet. Someone's going to steal this idea. Someone's going to steal that idea. You don't talk to anyone about what you're doing, you're never going to sell anything. You're never going to speak to a customer. You're never going to figure out what they want. You know, you have to be able to communicate well, be open, look at minimum viable prototypes and keep moving through them because actually that will tell you either no one cares, it's not worth pursuing, and you drop it out and you've not spent too much money, or wow, there's actually really something here and we could really pursue it because not everyone's got bags of startup capital. You've got to step by step it.
So to add to this, it just made me think of like when we launched our first crisp flavor. So it's a chili lemon and cracked salt. So the
Yeah,
idea
that
of
one was delicious. It
so
was
that
so good.
came from my dad growing up in Kenya and getting like cassava chips from the street traders, and they used to put chili, lemon, and salt on the cassava chips, and he'd munch on that on the way home. We grew up having that as like a weekend snack because they'd fry them and they tasted like crisps. And then when the idea came about for us to create a crisp, that was the first flavor, the chili, lemon, and cracked salt. So the cheapest way for us to develop that idea was for my dad to actually make the powder mix, and then we went to crisps manufacturers
Yeah,
that offered white label, and we bought sample crisps off them, and we
yeah,
seen the crisps ourselves, tasted them, and we're like, we're willing to bet on this that this is so delicious that people are going to love it, and that exactly what you mentioned is what we did. We went to a few people, not a lot. We went to a few people and said, look, what do you think of this flavor? Is there anything else like it in the marketplace and would you buy it? And everyone was like, this is delicious. Never had anything like it. I definitely want to buy this whenever it's ready. And
yeah.
we trade customers as well. And that was enough for us. And then obviously on our social media, we were asking
Mm.
people, and we were, like you were saying, we were telling them the story. We're like, look, this is a flavor that we're developing. And we're like taking a video of my dad making this flavor. We're putting it on crisps. What do you think? And people are watching this stuff and they're saying, yeah, I want that. I
Yeah,
want what you're doing. And that gave us enough confidence to say, all right, we're going to drop 20 grand on developing this.
exactly.
That's scary because that money is invested and you haven't sold anything.
Yeah.
And right now I have to make this work. And interestingly, we realized then that sampling and that digital businesses do it all the time. I call it the drug dealer method, right? What drug dealers, what do? They give a free sample with Denzel Washington. They give a
Yeah.
free product uh, to their customers, and then the customers keep coming back for more. And so that's what we did. We did the drug dealer method. We actually secured over 250 trade customers
Yeah.
with launch because we would call them up and we'd say, look, we're going to send you a sample of our product. Try it. If you like it, then you can buy it from us. But we sent them because we didn't have massive budget. You talk about micro testing. We sent them two individual crisps in a tiny little baggie,
Oh, literally two crisps.
two crisps in a tiny little baggie in a tiny little box that would fit through the letterbox. That was the
Oh,
cheapest
that's amazing.
way for us to get samples out. So we sent out
Yeah.
500 samples, maybe less than that. I don't know. We sent out a bunch of
Yeah.
samples, made phone calls, and then we followed up and we said, "Look, did you get the sample?" And a lot of people were like, "Are you taking the piss? You sent us two crisps." And I said, "Well, yeah. You wanted to taste it, so you can taste it. Do you want to buy them?" They were like, "Yeah, it's delicious, but I only tasted a little bit." And then we would tell them the truth. They were, "Look, this is our business. This is how we're starting.
Yeah.
We are making these crisps, but we need to get samples out, and we don't have samples. This is the best that we can do at this point." And a lot of people were like, "Fair enough. You're taking the piss a bit, but fair enough. Yes, I will buy your product." So we got 250 customers, trade customers, off the back of
Yeah.
that. Um, and then the rest, as they say, is history. But it
Yeah.
was about testing the marketplace, making sure that the product we thought was incredible is also incredible in the minds of our
Yeah.
and
Do you know,
when that
yeah. Well, with that as well, right? Like one really important thing which I saw you do, and we've done it as well, is don't let perfect, don't wait for perfect because there's no such thing, right? Like I've met too many startups where they'll spend bags and bags and bags of money trying to get their branding on point, blah blah blah, blah before they've even launched. And then they launch and they realize their brand's just not right for the market anyway. You've got to iterate. You've got to be prepared to, is it good enough? It's fine. It doesn't need to be perfect because there's no such thing.
why do you think people do that? Why do you think people try and get something perfect? Do you think it's a lack of experience? Is it
Yeah.
fear? Is it a lack of confidence in themselves or in their products? What do you think it is?
I think sometimes it's surrounding yourself with too many advisors because right now it's so easy to go get a marketing agency or something. And typically, like when I started, if I didn't know something, I'd have to just learn it and try it. Whereas now, it's really easy to just go get a consultant. And so, and a consultant's not incentivized for you to spend less money, right? So if you're developing a brand, you can either just try and do it and figure it out, or you can go pay a marketing agency 20, 30, 40,000 pounds to do it for you. At which point you've sort of lost that initial control anyway. There's an extent to which, of course, as your business grows and professionalizes, you bring in the experts and they help you make things really, really good. But those early stages for you as a founder, there's going to be loads of stuff you don't know about. When I first started out in business, I didn't know most of it. I didn't know accounts. I didn't know branding. I didn't know Jack, but I had to just figure it out. And
You know, sorry, mate. You know what's interesting? I'm just sitting here thinking about this whole Nine Nugs experiment, really, this whole project that you and I are embarking on, and thinking back to the conversations we've had about why we're doing this and why we're putting it together. And actually, there's so much that we don't know, and that we're figuring out, like
yeah,
literally by week, day by day, on this new journey that we're on. Um, and I think it's interesting just having this conversation because a lot of what we're talking about it applies to this as well, right? It applies to what we're doing right now and how we go about putting it out into the world because we decided very quickly on what we wanted to do, what it's going to look like. It's not perfect, but it's like, okay, it's enough for us to say yes to. We're
yeah.
going to
And ultimately, so yeah, exactly. Like with this, it's almost kind of, when we were sat, having a coffee in London, and we're like, well, what would we want to listen to? What would we want to learn from? And ultimately, for me personally, a lot of business podcasts and publications, they're far too polished. Like, what I want to know is the nitty-gritty of, well, what was that like? Or how did that feel? Or how did you get around problems? Or what did you do? Or, because I can learn from that. What I don't want is some hyper ultra produced navel gazing and some Instagram quotes because what am I going to learn from that? I need something real, and that's why I was quite excited about this because every time we have one of these conversations and we think about a topic that's going to be important for people, and that we've been through, and we can chat about it, and it's fun.
And you know what? It's hearing you talk about that, being honest and being vulnerable and being open. I definitely feel like, especially in the similar to you, like in the first version of Mr. Sings, I'm pretty confident I made every possible mistake there is to make.
Same.
I you know, spent so much money and wasted so much money on things. Like I've drained my life savings. I think I've went close to being bust daily. Um, you know, working with family. Like you said, I didn't know anything about recruitment, sales, profit and loss, cash flow, marketing, branding,
Massively.
that stuff. Like no one teaches you. And like, yes, you can go out now to get consultants and there's YouTube videos and there's books. But I still believe, man, like just getting out there and doing it,
Yeah.
seeking help as often as you possibly can. Sorry, as often as you come across a problem, once you've had that problem,
Yeah.
probably the right way to go about it, rather than trying to uh, foresee every single problem and solve that problem before it
Yeah,
happens.
exactly. And also, you know what? The reality is a lot of this stuff isn't that hard, right? Like there's a whole industry that's trying to make it sound hard because then they can sell you their 12-step plan or whatever. But a lot of this stuff is just if you're prepared to be humble and ask questions, you'll figure it out. Like it's fine. And like you said, I had it in my own journey. There was loads of areas where I tried to figure it out and I couldn't. And then I went and asked somebody for help, right? And and then you always make mistakes and you've got to just be like, I didn't know that. I'll give you a really silly example. When I started my first business a long time ago, um, when I was invoicing clients, like the first few months I was trading, I just put VAT and put a number, like added a percentage on and sent it. And I remember once my bookkeeper, I was like, "Are you VAT registered?" I'm like, "I don't know what that is." And he goes, "But you're putting VAT on." And I said, I just assumed it was a thing and people put it on an invoice. I don't know what it is. And
No,
and he then very quickly had to get me VAT registered and unpick it all. But this is the point. It's like even now, even after all these years, I never want to be the guy that sits there and goes, yeah, I know it, I've got it. I just rather be humble and go, teach me, because you'll always learn something, right? Like I learn lots from you when we chat.
yeah, likewise, likewise. And to add to what you're talking about in terms of a lot of it being easy, I feel like it, in theory and on paper, yes, business is easy. It's very logical. It's very simple. It's really straightforward. I feel like the real world application is where the hard work really comes in.
Yeah,
Being in business, being an entrepreneur is not easy.
no, absolutely not.
From a mental health perspective, from an emotional perspective, like bringing that idea to life, and like this whole conversation started from the question, if we had a business and no one knew about it and we're launching a brand, how would we go about doing it? It's not easy. Like the steps that we've talked about, the challenges that we've talked about and how to overcome them sound easy, and on paper they are straightforward. But saying like, oh, okay, I'd go out and get 1,000 people to join a wait list. All right,
It's hard.
go and get 1,000 people who are genuinely interested, not just someone that said, "Oh yeah, I'll sign up," and then they never do anything, but a
Yeah.
thousand people that are actually going to buy your product. Go on then, go and do it.
And you know what's even harder than that is if you
Well,
find out that no one cares, right? Like, and that's the being humble bit. Like, you have to be prepared to take real world feedback if you're going to do it, and that's sometimes really hard because you're like, no, I love this, and people are like, I'm just not that bothered to be honest, and you got to be prepared for that as well. And like you said, it's just, maybe here's an idea. Maybe our next chat we talk about this bit because you and I have both had to hammer phones and get those calls and get those meetings and go through rejection. And I wonder whether next time we chat, why don't we do that as our topic of actually
I'm
how you build that resilience to get through the rejections and the no's and those first early days because I think that's really important.
Yeah, I've got some good stories to share about that whole experience and how I developed my skills. ironically on the streets of London selling credit cards, but that's a different story for a different day.
Yeah.
All right, so look, this is nine nugs. Let's try and extract nine nuggets of critical information from our conversation. So the question started, the conversation started with the question, if you were to launch a brand today that no one knew about and you wanted it to be successful, how would you go about doing it? Um, First point is
Know your customer. You
know your
have, yeah, you have to get to know your customer like as deeply as you possibly can.
okay. Second point is what?
What's what's the problem you're trying to fix?
Okay, what know your customer, what's the problem you're trying to fix? The third point is
What is the smallest experiment you can run to figure out if what you're thinking is true?
okay, fantastic. So we know who our customer is,
Right.
we know what problem we're solving, we're running experiments as to how we can solve that particular problem for them.
And what
Uh,
do you think number four is?
Four, I feel, would then become start to understand the story that you can tell your customer
Yeah,
about themselves and about how you're solving that problem for them so that they can start to emotionally connect to you.
yeah,
I would say the fifth component is understanding the what's the word? Understanding how where you're going to communicate with them. Like where does your
mm,
customer your ideal customer with the problem that you've got, where are they hanging out so that you can get in front of them consistently,
yeah,
communicate with them that this is what you do and how you're solving the problem for them. So like you talked about earlier with the publication, or
yeah,
for us, we went to chili food festivals, that was an ideal audience consistently.
yeah. You know what? Number six, I think there's the you have to be brave, right? And I don't mean that in a kind of very generic way, but you have to be prepared to get out there and chat to people and have conversations and take feedback and hear stuff you don't want to hear. And, you know, you can't do that from behind a screen. You have to get out and actually interact with real people to do that. And that's so important. But it takes a bit of bravery to do that. It's not nice in those early days. It's not easy, but you really have to do it.
So then that leads me to number seven, which I feel should be adaptability. So
Yeah,
being adaptable in your original idea, like we talked about, we may start off as a coffee shop, but we end up opening as a social working space or community workspace, and that's how the branding and the
yeah,
marketing goes out.
yeah.
So that number, what was
Seven.
that? That was number seven.
So
Okay, number eight, launching a brand. What knows about? What would number eight be? The eighth nugget. Hmm.
do you know what? This is going to sound like a really weird one, but it's also understand what do you want out of it, right? Because I was with a client this week who is in luxury fashion, right? And we were having a conversation about growth, and they were talking about Gymshark and Adenola and all these things. And I said, well, but they're volume brands. Like, is that what you want to do? Like, do you want to just create a volume brand that grows and makes money and that's fine? Like, that's perfectly acceptable. Is that what you want? And the founder was like, well, actually, no, I want to create something that outlasts me. I was like, well, that's really interesting. That's a whole different business.
Yeah.
And and it's really important for you to know what you want. Are you building something to sell it? Are you building something just because you want to scale it and make some money? Are you building something because it really matters to you? Because if you don't know that, or you won't know all the strategies to take, because all of those things are completely strategically different in how you would approach building a business.
And I suppose then that is going to lead me on to the
The ninth nugget.
nug. I feel, if you agree with it, should be time,
Yeah,
meaning that even the brands, I could be wrong, but even the brands that seem like they are an overnight success from the minute they started their social media account, I'm confident it's taken years for them to get there, either building an audience and researching that audience, either building a community offline and doing work behind the scenes
Yeah.
but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And you have to be prepared to ride that period of time one way or another until you open the doors and it starts working. And even then, you may still have to work elsewhere. You may still have to rely on your savings until the business starts paying for itself.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
and I add just a small story to that. With Mr. Sings, when we relaunched, we were delayed by a year because of some banking issues and supply issues. Launching a brand that's already got 100,000 followers, relaunching a brand that's already got 100,000 plus followers. So the fact is that we had to adapt, we had to manage our time until we were able to relaunch in the summer and then hit the ground running. And it seemed
Um,
like we hit the ground running. Our first music video that we dropped,
yeah,
1 million views, but that 1 million views took 9 months
yeah,
for us to get 1 million views overnight. Like it didn't.
yeah.
So I think time, as long as you're happy with it, I think that should be the ninth nug.
I agree. And it's an eternal frustration of mine because so many stories are depicted as overnight or quick or whatever. And yeah, you know what? There are some very rare occasions where that happens, but in general, it takes massive amounts of time. Like, you talk about like Prime Hydrate, some of these products. The product was successful overnight, but because somebody had spent 10 years building an influencer platform where they already had a customer base, right? It's
Two
not
of
an
them,
overnight success.
not just one of them, two of them,
Yeah,
KS and Logan Paul,
yeah,
biggest and the best YouTubers co-launching a brand is what it took for it to become what it is today.
exactly. So I love that. Time is really important. So listen, this has been, I love this. This was our first experimental conversation. I think it's been really fun. I hope that our Substack subscribers give us some feedback as well and let us know, like what do you guys want to talk about? But I think this has been really fun, man.
Yeah, same man. I
Great.
think I feel like it's the type of conversation that you and I have, probably a little bit more well behaved than when we're off camera, but I'm hoping to bring in the real world version
I
on over
I
time.
I did wonder whether or not every now and again we should just do an episode where we just bottle of whiskey on the table and just chatting about something that's annoying us. I think that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, maybe we're in person. Because I swear a
I
lot.
Yeah, that'll be fun and it has to be in person. But listen, have a great day, man. I'll stop the recording in a second, but have a really good day.